Hey guys, it's Drew again. I once heard a comment that somebody said, you can always tell a baseball card collector at a business convention because they're the only ones that's looking at all the business cards and seeing how centered they are. Well, today we're going to talk about a card that's so far off center that most of you would say, I don't want it, but after the end of the video, I bet anybody would love this card in this collection. Let's check it out. So part of being a vintage collector is, of course, knowing what you want in a card. We can't afford all graded, high, perfect, gem mint 10 kind of cards. So we have to kind of give and take on what sort of things we want. Some people love, sharp corners. Some people want fine edges. Some people want clear, clear focus. Other people want no print dots or anything like that, but I think the majority of people would say centering. An off-centered card is what they don't like. And honestly, centering doesn't bother me too much, but there are some people that are very, very extreme at it. My good friend Dylan at Double D Vintage Cards has been on this quest to kind of replace his collection and, quote, downgrade it to lower graded cards but with high and perfect centering. And I gotta tell you, he has found some beautiful cards. Other friends of mine have some amazing cards, and the centering does help frame the card perfectly. And while some people find it so highly appealing that that's what they want is perfect centering, and other people not so much. The point is that when you look at a card, whether it's high on your scale of what you want or not so high, you do look at the centering. But there are some cards, especially in vintage, that are off-cut, and I'm talking way off-cut. With me, I'm not a big centering fan, but as long as I can see a little bit of the actual border of the card on one side, top or bottom, left or right, doesn't matter, then that's okay with me. It doesn't really bother me as much as it might somebody else. But there are some cards that are so badly off-cut, it makes you wonder what was going on, let's say with Topps and quality control that let it go. So I want to show you a card from 1978. Now this is not the card from my original collection, but 1978 was the first year that I had cards, and I remember these cards very well. And I want to show you 1978, card number 22, sort of, Mr. Charlie Hough. And Charlie Hough, if you don't know who he is, he's kind of not known for anything huge, but there's a couple things I always found interesting about Charlie Hough. And first of all, he seemed to pitch forever. He played for a long, long time, and I remember him in the 90s when he was on the Braves for a little bit in their World Series. This is him back in 1978 on the Dodgers, and Charlie Hough was one of the three pitchers that gave up a home run to Reggie Jackson when he hit three home runs in the World Series in 1977, and he was one of them. He wasn't like a power pitcher by any means, but one of the things I always thought was funny as a kid for Charlie Hough was he was one of those guys that no matter how old he was, his cards always looked like he was really kind of old. And I'm not picking on him because, you know, God made us all differently, and that's fine. But let's say in this card he was, let me get the year, he was born in 1948, so he was 30 years old when this card was taken, or 29. And yeah, he just kind of looks like he's already in his mid-40s or maybe even 50. But anyway, I'm not picking on him, but he's just one of those guys that he was kind of around for a long time. He played for a number of teams. He was a pretty good pitcher. He was never a number one starter, but he was a good player. But when you're looking at this card, as I continue to show it, it is way off. And it's off, well, top and bottom centering isn't too bad, but of course left and right is ridiculous. And even if you look at the back, the top and bottom is way off, and it's so far off that you can actually see the next card, Bob Lacey's name from the A's next to it. And what I find interesting about this card is not just so off-centered, because truthfully you can find a number of cards that actually got through quality control that were so poorly off-centered. What's cool about this card is also not, I'm going to say this for my friend Hugo, not that there's trees in the background, he's got a big thing for trees, so I give him a little silent shout out there. But anyway, the cool thing about this card is, if you think about it, when cards were printed, they were printed in a large sheet. And for a card to be off-cut this much, then the entire sheet must have shifted in the cutter, and it cut, and they got packed up in packs and sent out anyway. But that means that this is not the only card that was this far off-cut. In fact, I actually have a few other cards that are pretty poorly off-cut, all from the same set. So here's another one, pretty badly off-cut. It's Bill Travers. Here's another one, Floyd Bannister, and finally the last one I have is well, it's Bob Lacey. And Bob Lacey, that sounds familiar. We just talked about Bob Lacey, but one of the things I find cool is not how badly this card is miscut. It's the fact that they were so miscut that all four of these cards, if you put them together, actually creates, and I don't think my hands are big enough to do this, but actually can create a picture of what the entire scene of what that whole sheet was. And this is one of those cool things that value-wise, there's not a whole lot of it, but it's just kind of cool to have it. I have it in a kind of in a little cabinet that I use, and when people come, they always look at it and they think that's so cool. And I keep them in these little mini snap ties, so there is no extra plastic border. But if you look at the cards as individual, they just look, I don't know, not very desirable. But when you can put them all together, it kind of tells a story. It tells the whole story, and it makes it a whole lot more cool. So I don't know, whether you like centered cards or not, whether you obsess over how 4951 is too, it's not centered enough, or it doesn't really matter to you or not. I figured I'd show off 4 cards from a set that I had as a kid. That, sorry, 4 cards that I had from a set as a kid, and how they kind of all together. I think it would be super cool if I was able to piece together a whole sheet that was offcut that much, or at least maybe a whole row. But I'll take these 4 cards. Again, not a whole lot of value, but to me a whole lot of cool. So I appreciate you guys checking it out, and I hope everybody's doing well, and you guys be good.